The Philippines, as we all know, is a developing country. However, it is still experiencing several problems that affects its development. And now we will cover the economic problems confronting the development of the Philippines in the 21st century. The first problem that we will talk about is something that millions of Filipinos are currently experiencing: poverty. Poverty is a condition in which families could not attain the minimum level of consumption for subsistence living. These families might have little or no resources and cannot earn sufficient income that can provide the minimum nutritional requirements for daily living and the basic necessities of clothing and shelter. There are mainly two types of poverty: absolute poverty and relative poverty. But first, let us discuss absolute poverty. So, absolute poverty is poverty due to the lack of income to buy the basic food and necessities for subsistence living. This is measured through the poverty threshold and poverty incidence. The poverty threshold is the income needed to purchase the minimum nutritional requirements and other basic necessities for daily survival. According to the Philippine Statistical Authority, the annual per capita poverty threshold in 2015 is 22,747. If your annual income is less than that, it means that you are under absolute poverty. You cannot buy the minimum necessities for daily living. And in 2018, the annual per capita poverty threshold increased to 25,813. Any annual income less than that means that you are under absolute poverty. Poverty incidence is the proportion of the households in the country with family income lower than the poverty threshold. So these are people who are experiencing poverty. So here is the data from the Philippine Statistical Authority. In year 2006, the poverty incidence was at 25.9%. This means that more than one-fourth of the entire population in the Philippines are experiencing poverty. The good thing is, the poverty incidence in the Philippines is decreasing every year. In 2018, the poverty incidence recorded an all-time low of 16.6%. However, millions of families are still under poverty. The second kind of poverty is relative poverty. So this is poverty due to the structure on how the national income is being distributed among households in an economy. To further understand this, let us look at this table. So this is the percentage distribution of total family income by income deciles. So these are ranked from poorest to richest. The first income decile is 10% of the total population with the lowest national income, and they're only sharing 1.7% of the total national income, while the ninth and 10th decile holds more than half of the total national income. Take note that the ninth and 10th decile is only 20% of the total population, but they hold more than half of the total national income. The next problem would be the demographic changes and its economic implications. The population of the Philippines has been increasing for the past several decades. However, is population growth really good or bad? With a greater population, the Philippines has more access to human capital. However, given the limited arable land in the country, it has been argued that rapid population growth will reduce the available land per person and can put a toll on productivity of the agricultural sector. In line with the previous problem, the Philippines also faces low investment in human resource development. As stated earlier, the Philippines is rich in human capital. Although the size of the labor force can have positive contributions on economic growth, the quality of human resources has greater growth impact. A highly trained workforce is more productive than a pool of unskilled workers. The Philippines should further invest in its knowledge capital. It should invest in higher education, science and technology, and research and development. Another problem in the Philippines would be the weak infrastructure and food security. We might have an advantage when it comes to the quantity of human capital. However, physical infrastructure facilities expands transactions that likewise fuel economic growth. We need roads, bridges, and other networks in transportation and communication because these grids link economic sectors tightly. So the government can finance these infrastructures to borrowing money from banks, taxation, and public-private partnerships. When it comes to food security, there's always this debate between food security and food self-sufficiency. Food security is the state of having reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food, while food self-sufficiency refers to a country's capacity to meet its own food needs from domestic production. We all know that the Philippines imports most of its food from neighboring countries, despite having the means to produce so. So this is a problem that the government should also address. The next one would be the slow adoption of modern technology. The Philippines is a labor-intensive country. However, capital-intensive technologies has been the trend in the past few decades. Most new production technologies makes it more efficient for companies to produce their goods. However, our country still relies on manual labor when it comes to production. And last is environmental sustainability and the country's development thrust. The environment has always suffered the consequences of development. Due to urbanization, most areas in the Philippines are highly polluted. However, the environment is part of natural resources where we derive income from the utilization of its wealth. But the excessive use of our natural resources may compromise its ability to provide income and other benefits in the future. So there is always a need to mitigate the negative consequences of our economic activities on the environment. These are just some of the economic problems that hinders the development of the Philippines. All of these should be taken into consideration when making a decision. And that's it for this lesson. Thank you and have a good day.